Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 17 of Live with CAFA. My name is Donna Bishop. I am the host of Fashion Talks, the podcast about observing the world through the lens of fashion. And I am just thrilled that today we are going to be joined by Sarah J. Sarah J has an extensive resume. Not only is she an incredible fashion stylist, not only is she a globally renowned environmental activist, she has worked with the likes of the Green Shows in New York City. She is the original and longstanding creative director of Fashion Takes Action. She was part of the inspiration and was motivated to begin the foundation of the award-winning documentary Toxic Beauty. She has guest edited the sustainability issue of Fashion Magazine here in Canada. She has worked with celebrities and activists the like, and most recently she has started a project called All Earthlings, which is dedicated to removing animal products from our beauty products. And I know she is going to give an even better description than I am. I just need to find her in the feed here. She is. We're just waiting for Sarah J to join us now. And we are going to be talking about how COVID has impacted sustainability for the fashion and beauty industry. Sarah.
Hi, buddy.
How are you?
I'm well. I'm really glad to see you.
It is so nice to see your face as well. Before we get into, I know you have so much wisdom and knowledge and insights to impart upon all of us who work in the fashion and beauty adjacent industries about how this crazy time of COVID is perhaps impacting or will impact sustainability as it relates to these industries. But first, I just want to ask you how you're doing. What is quarantine looking like for you right now?
Well, as a freelancer, I'm definitely used to a degree of uncertainty. So that hasn't changed. But you know what? I'm also someone who has tons of passion projects on the go and never enough time to, deal with them. And so in that sense, I'm making progress on some important things in the absence of client work formally. When this happened, it was definitely a buzzkill because momentum in one's career is so hard earned. And I had a year queued up of really meaningful projects and that were all sustainable and all very much on brand and meaningful for me. So definitely I have mourned, like all of us, just the loss of all of these events and things that we look forward to. So, but I'm managing and, I have a mask making initiative going on with Taylor S. Like many Canadian designers who are rising to the occasion and providing these essential materials for frontline workers and for all of us, really. So that has been filling my time. And then, as you mentioned, research on the use of undisclosed animal ingredients in consumer products as an extension of the film Toxic Beauty. That's the next big thing that I'll be working on. And then I've also, become a vegan chef and food stylist in support of my dear friend, Harriet Sharp, who is the owner and operator of Raw Lioness in the Junction. So it's been really vibey to have that creative flex in the short term and support her business.
I noticed on Instagram today that Queer Eye host Tan France has also moved into doing stuff with food styling. So you are in the zeitgeist as per usual.
Yes, for sure. I mean, it's not that far apart, and especially from a creative standpoint, using my hands is what drew me to fashion in the first place. So.
Sarah, I want to kind of get into the meat of our discussion today. And I think it's fair to say that, in recent months and years leading up to COVID, the whole impact of the fashion and beauty industry as it relates to sustainability was starting to get some real traction. I think it was something we were becoming more aware of, globally, more aware of in our own, habits, perhaps. How has the massive impact of COVID impacted sustainability as it relates to fashion and beauty? And I know that's a big question. We'll drill into it a little bit, but from a macro sense, has it taken the wind out of those sails? Is it a distraction? Has it put a new spotlight on it? What's your take on that relationship?
I would say all of the above. Sustainability is a really big word that encompasses many things, and definitely since Rana Plaza in 2013 and the subsequent creation of Fashion Revolution Day and Fashion Revolution Week, we definitely have become more aware of fashion's true cost. Shout out to the film True Cost, which has put that phrase into our lexicon. So definitely there's a broader awareness where we're starting to acknowledge the flaws in the current system. But, before that, sustainability was considered sort of a niche or a branch of fashion. It was Kelly Drennan and I at Fashion Takes Action sort of having these sustainability conversations off to the side, apart from the conventional industry that has its conventional methods. Now what we're seeing is, sustainability being considered within a brand from the ground up, and the race to sort of retrofit your operations to become more sustainable. So in every sense, sustainability will be the new normal. And again, that's challenging because it means so many things, and it's an overwhelming and still sort of vague word for a lot of people. But it's up to us to break down what that really means and encourage any sort of engagement, any level of engagement.
What would you say are the pillars of sustainability? If you had to break it down for someone who is, kind of looking at you with a cocked eye going, what do you mean by sustainability in fashion and beauty? How would you simply parse that out for them?
Well, we can divide it two ways, essentially. There's the social impacts and there's the environmental impacts. And, even within that, there's things to consider like representation, diversity, and inclusion. So, really there's so much under that heading. But to get back to your original question, which I feel like I maybe didn't answer, two of the biggest things that, COVID has put a spotlight on are the flaws in the fashion calendar. We've been operating on this, regimented, timeline that generates a lot of excess. And we are a globalized industry. It is always summertime somewhere. It is always wintertime somewhere. So the pressure to create on this schedule and to have a sales season and a manufacturing season and to base our production numbers on these projections based on past seasons is inefficient. And it also requires a huge investment on the part of a designer, or like a designer is required to have an investment partner, or is forced to, foot the bill for manufacturing in the meantime, which is incredibly stressful. So definitely the future of fashion is going to center around pre-sale and on-demand manufacturing. And when we use those technologies to manufacture that way, it also opens us up to customize and fit, which has always been a problem with ready-to-wear. We know that there's lots to be desired in terms of size inclusion, but also just even if you are straight sized, there's still room for improved fit. The other conversation that is starting to happen with more urgency because of COVID is the concept of reshoring or nearshoring. We've realized that, we relegate fashion's most difficult processes to other parts of the world. And as a result, we don't have the robust manufacturing industry here in Canada that we once did. If you go to Value Village and if you're looking at clothing that is made in the 80s and 90s, you see made in Canada quite a bit. Pardon me. Now, that's really not the case. And the business model or the goal for a lot of even Canadian designers is to get to a point where you are manufacturing overseas so that you can enjoy those margins from cheaper labor. So we're realizing now with border closures and this sort of unprecedented pandemic that we've painted ourselves into a corner, and that fashion fundamentally is rooted in function. It's become this other fantastical thing, this art form and this source of expression and pleasure and a thousand other things, but it's rooted in function. We are a clothed species, and we need to ensure that we have a strong, skilled labor force here in Canada so that we can continue to manufacture what we need, whether that's protective gear or whether that's apparel, and that requires government support. There's many of us working on something called the FIAP panel, to have fashion considered as an art, and to have fashion be included and eligible for government funding the way it is in many other countries.
Can you talk a little bit about how fashion is treated from a government perspective here in Canada, just for people who don't know? And I don't know if you can see, but there are like tears streaming down my face, not just because I'm so emotional about this, but because I have sunscreen in my eyes. So I'm just going to blot my eyes off camera while you continue to explain the relationship between fashion and government support. So I'll be right back.
Yeah, I mean, in every sense, fashion is a feminist issue, and we haven't maybe had the government support that we deserve, largely because we are a workforce that is predominantly female. So this has everything to do with the patriarchy that we very much need to smash. So when government provides support for fashion businesses, we're able to meet the demands locally, and without that, nothing's going to change. It really does need to come from the top down in many cases. And again, fashion can be the fantastical, fashion in the fantastical sense, but fashion also encompasses apparel. And we need to bring that closer to home. When your supply chain is closer to home, you can oversee it, so much better. And so many of the problems, especially regarding labor and environmental impacts, are improved under the regulations that are built into, Canada that don't exist in other developing countries. A lot of the times we manufacture in other countries precisely because they lack the regulation that would protect human rights and ensure on-site childcare and paid time off and these types of things, even something as simple as a living wage.
Pivoting just a little bit, because that's, from an industry, those of us who work in the industry perspective, there's so much of that has been brought to light and is important to unpack and reevaluate. As someone who is a lover and a consumer of fashion, how has COVID shifted perhaps how people who don't work in the industry but love the industry can start to shift their thinking about what sustainability means in a post-COVID world?
Well, I think we're realizing that fashion is a privilege. In many senses, it's not essential. And especially if you're not going to work every day and you are working from home, the type of clothing that you need and that you wear is going to change. So we've already seen, this shift to streetwear, this shift to, feminist footwear and comfies and these types of trends. But I think that in this new world where we're not leaving home as much, we're literally living with our excess. And a lot of us are going through our closets and realizing like, oh my gosh, I don't wear this at all. I need to get rid of it. Which is a good segue into another, challenge that we're facing right now, which is responsible disposal of clothing. So now really isn't the time to, even if you are decluttering and organizing at home because you're spending more time and you have the time, it's really important to hang on to that clothing a little bit longer. Or
it's time to hoard our discards.
Yeah, no, it really is. because a lot of organizations like Value Village, they don't have employees in stores and nobody's there to process the donations. So all of that clothing is going to waste. And textile waste in landfill is one of the hugest issues in sustainability. There's so many more options in terms of what can be done with our used clothing. But we need to hang on a little bit for the systems to catch up and ensure that there's a place for that clothing right now.
It does maybe worth touching upon as well that while donating clothing we no longer have a need for is one of the best ways to dispose of things we no longer have a use for in our own lives, there is also the channel of consignment. And I know in many parts across Canada, consignment boutiques are still receiving garments. They're still selling garments. They're doing it within the protocols of what our health experts are saying needs to happen for retail. There's still Poshmark and other sites where that is possible. So it's a stream that's still worth considering, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And consignment is a little different than donation. Consignment is suitable and you have a special piece or a brand name that's still in great condition. So absolutely restream that to somewhere like VSP or Common Sort or any of these stores that will take it and you'll get a little bit of money back when that item is sold. But in terms of those lower level, apparel, clothing that you just need to sort of get out the door that are, maybe worn to shreds even, that's the stuff that we need to hang on to at this point.
I know this is something you've spoken about before, but I think it's always worth repeating. How do I get rid of things like my panties that might be past its prime, or that old bra I no longer wear, or those face cloths that just, may no longer be suitable for the bathroom, but the textile is still good?
That's a great question. Sometimes we feel self-conscious about those intimates, disposing of those intimates, but still donating to a place like Value Village will allow for the responsible separation and recycling of those items. So it's super important to, again, hang on to those clothes and those items for the time being until the system has updated and can accommodate those donations once again. But you know what? It's also a time to get creative. Like those items can be downcycled into rags, into sort of, things we use to clean. The internet is also full of inspiring DIY tutorials. And, some of us have a bit of time on our hands that we didn't before. So working with our hands is, for me, it's my favorite way to sort of calm my mind and to geek out into a little project. So definitely looking into what can be done to, repair a worn item or to upcycle and create something new.
It's interesting you say that because Susan Raphael, who's a mental health expert, and she was one of our earlier guests on these Live with CAFA episodes, she talked a lot about from a mental health perspective, how important it is for us to do things with our hands, that it actually has a physiological impact on our release of stress reducing hormones. And it's no surprise that in these stressful times, we've seen an uptick in coloring, crafts, baking, like things that are so incredibly textiled. And if people are tactile, pardon me. And if people are interested in hearing more of what she has to say, it's episode, I think, 2 or 3 of the Live with CAFAs that you can see on our Instagram TV channel. If you're just joining us, this is Live with CAFA. I'm here with Sarah J., globally recognized environmental activist, fashion director, among many other talents. We're talking about sustainability as it relates to the COVID crisis and the fashion and beauty industry. Sarah, I know there's so much more to talk about within the fashion industry, but I do want to pivot to talk about beauty a little bit, because I know that as one who's been quite open about your multiple chemical sensitivity issues, that was something that really laid the groundwork for the foundation of what became the Toxic Beauty documentary. And there's been some very, very exciting impacts of that film during quarantine. So can you talk please a little bit about, the film generally and what has happened since since the release, as it relates to sustainability and the beauty industry?
For sure. Material health and chemical exposure is a huge passion of mine. I think that sometimes we wait for passion to show up in our lives in a positive sense, but for me at least, the things that I care about and the things that are my passions have shown up in really painful ways. And this is an example of maybe what can happen when you lean into those feelings of injustice, or in this case, chronic illness, which has incurred, for me, from a high chemical body burden and a lot of chemical overexposure. So I have MCS, which has come from treating my acne topically and orally with pharmaceuticals. I was a swimmer and I had definitely a chlorine overexposure, and I have binged on beauty products like few other people have. The film definitely is based on the work of one of my idols, Dr. Rick Smith, who in this book conducts a whole bunch of self-experiments, not unlike they do in Super Size Me, the film. McDonald's, he binges on conventional care products, and as a result, proves that these chemicals are accumulating in our bodies and have a measurable impact. So Toxic Beauty is essentially this book on screen, and it centers around the human health impacts of chemical overexposure through personal care. There are also environmental impacts, what happens when we wash these products down the drain, and beauty definitely has a plastic issue, a plastic packaging issue that needs to be addressed. But Toxic Beauty focuses on what happens in our bodies when we are constantly exposed to the hundreds of chemicals per day that we apply in the name of beauty and hygiene. So for legal reasons, the film centers around the Johnson & Johnson talc baby powder issue. And last Monday, I am so thrilled to report that finally, after years of research and advocating, and it's a huge effort, spread across many sectors. Johnson & Johnson has finally pulled baby powder off the shelves in North America, and it's a huge win. So I have, at least for the week, I've decided to celebrate and enjoy that win because it is quite major, and not lost on me that the film has very much served to put the heat back on this issue. There's no new science in this film. It's worth pointing out. All we did is put the researchers and the scientists and the advocates and the whistleblowers on the screen to tell the story. Not everyone is willing to go through the scientific journals, but film, as we know, is a great way to consume these important messages. So we're really proud. It's a major win.
Well, and if people are interested in seeing the film, I know it is available on the CBC free streaming platform GEM. Are there other places people can watch it, or that's the best place to go? Because we could talk for 2 hours just on what's in that film, Toxic Beauty. So I really encourage people to go and check it out. And then on Sarah's Instagram handle, we're planning on doing some more drill down sustainability conversations. Yeah. Sarah, from a beauty industry perspective, do you think COVID is shifting our understanding or our heightened awareness and incentive to make shifts in the beauty industry as it relates to sustainability? Because, like you said, with fashion, sustainability has so many meanings. And within the beauty industry, it can be ingredients, it can be packaging, it can be testing on animals, which we'll get to in a minute because I know that's a real passion of yours. Is COVID going to impact, or do you see it with your conversations with your network and your colleagues, it shining a different light on the industry?
Mm-hmm. I do. I mean, I'm passionate about fashion and beauty, and especially beauty, maybe because of the boost that it gives us. So in dark times, cosmetics are still something that we continue to move. So in that sense, it's maybe not up against the same challenges as the fashion industry is. There's a really important piece of art that I've tried to find the artist to shout this person out. That I first saw on the RMS Instagram feed that says, "Call us ugly to sell us shit." And that really resonated with me. And I think that, we need to reconsider why we're reaching for, the products that we reach for, and, do the inner work that is involved in sustainability movement to question, who we're dressing up for and who we're making up for, and just reassess our relationship with our grooming regime, for sure.
So there are people who are tuning in who I know are within the industry. There are people who are tuning in who enjoy the industry. In this time of COVID, what can we be doing as lovers of the fashion and beauty industry to think more sustainably in a way that is possible in this time of quarantine right now?
Yeah. First of all, I'll say never underestimate your individual impact. Sustainability can be big and overwhelming, but any choice that you make has a positive outcome, and it's worth doing. Fashion Takes Action, the NGO that I've worked with since 2007, has a ton of great resources for learning about what you can do. One of those includes the 7 R's, which are reduce, reuse, recycle, which we all know, but also research. So get to know the issues in sustainability. Click on the sustainability tabs of your brands to learn about what they're doing and how they are mitigating and measuring impacts, where they're manufacturing, and if they even have a sustainability platform. Repurpose is relatively straightforward. Make use of what you have, whether that's upcycling existing material, diving into your closet and getting more creative to build outfits out of items that you haven't worn in a while. Repair, we touched on. We can't yet source to our tailors like we once did, but we can try and make use of internet tutorials and start doing these things ourselves. Renting is a great option. Definitely we're seeing that in terms of event dressing quite a bit. There's so much waste when it comes to dressing up for occasions, and we invest in these gowns and we're photographed in them, and then they often sit in our closets, and it's not the most efficient use of resources. So there's lots of options coming up in terms of renting the piece that you need for the occasion in which you need it, and then taking it back and allowing someone else to make use of it. I will add to the 7 R's. We touched on it just now, but reconsider whether you need to spend resources on something new. Oftentimes, when we need to scratch that retail fair itch, something else is going on. So it's important. Again, there's a lot of inner work that has to happen within the sustainability movement, and it does start with us individually and our personal consumption habits individually.
With the people in the industry who are already producing and manufacturing brands, is it your experience that COVID has increased their intention or their awareness of how this could be part of their brand and their business model?
Yeah, I think so. It remains to be seen. I think a lot of us are still sort of, reeling, and it's difficult because sustainability often involves big picture thinking, and it can be a longer term investment for brands. So it's difficult when you're up against these immediate challenges that need an immediate solution and an immediate band-aid. How can I possibly plan to make a more sustainable brand when I need to buy manufacturers, when I need to pay myself, So that's, I think, going to be the struggle. How do we deal with the short term while, rebuilding our industry to fundamentally last and to be less exploitative of people and planet? That's the challenge. And I wish I had one easy answer, but it's not one size fits all. So that said, don't hesitate, CAFA audience, to reach out to me, and I will make as much time as I can to speak to you individually about steps that you can take or business model to begin, to take a step, no matter how small, whether that's eliminating the plastic from your, courier materials, or whether that's, starting to have a dialogue with your clients about garment care, or whether that is, bringing your labor closer to home. There's always something that we can do.
I've noticed just watching what's happening on Instagram and whatnot, that as a solution to fears around COVID transmission, I've seen brands starting to talk about encasing their things in plastic as a way of promoting safety. And I thought, oh my goodness, what a collision we are coming on.
Yeah.
Because yeah, of course, like that is a way for us to feel more confident as consumers about the safety and the transmission of this virus. But it certainly comes at a cost, like anything else.
It really does, and the same is going on just in terms of the need for increased use of things like hand sanitizer and cleaning products. As someone who suffers from NCS, that's been really tough. I can smell it everywhere. But the reality is that things like hydrogen peroxide and rubbing alcohol.
Look at you with your props, Sarah J.
There still are solutions that get the job done, that aren't causing the antibiotic, resistance and, creation of superbugs that are associated with the use of triclosan, which is the active ingredient in hand sanitizer. So it's important to research alternatives. Plastic isn't always the answer, but you know what? There's a time and a place, and don't beat yourself up for the things that you need to do to keep yourself safe in the short term. A lot of the challenges in sustainability are systemic. You didn't individually cause them, and you aren't going to individually fix them. So it's important to focus on what we can do together.
Thank you for your generosity in offering to, be a consultant of sorts to the CAFA and greater, fashion community. Consultancy is certainly something that you have always done, but it's starting to take a more formal role in your professional lexicon, if that's fair to say. And I know that because of your works with Rob Stewart, that sharks are a very important part of the long daisy chain that is your career. Can you talk a little bit about that? We're just getting ready to wrap up a little bit, but I don't want to miss out on talking about that important project that you're working on.
So as we said, Toxic Beauty centers around health impacts of personal care. There's more to discuss, and one of those issues that is super important to me is ingredients of undisclosed animal origin. Right now, lots of us make sure that we only buy cosmetics that carry the vegan or cruelty-free trademark. But it's important to recognize that those are just marketing terms. There's no legal definition to terms vegan and cruelty-free. And we also have to understand that brands are really out of touch with their supply chain, and that's been proven in the case of Johnson & Johnson talc. There's an asbestos contamination nobody is accounting for and nobody wants to be honest about. So the same thing is happening in the case of an ingredient called squalene, which can come from sharks. It can also come from olives, sugar, corn, amaranth, and myriad plant sources. But the reality is that climate change is affecting plant-based squalene, and we're still in 2020 getting it from sharks. And so I'm working on releasing my independent research on the beauty industry's persistent use of shark-derived squalene, which poses a risk to oceanic ecosystems and vital species that we need. And that's the other thing that COVID has maybe been shining a light on, is biodiversity and the ecosystem services that we all rely on, and the role that robust species populations play in the prevention of infectious disease.
Sarah, just as we're getting ready to wrap up, and I want to thank you so much for coming on Live with CAFA today, what one piece of advice or one request would you give people who are within the fashion and beauty world and are part of the manufacturing and creation of the beautiful things that we love to own? And similarly, one request or piece of advice of those of us who love to support and consume these amazing products and industry from a sustainability point of view. What's one thing that you would ask of those two sides of this coin that is the fashion and beauty?
Oh, I would just remind everyone that fashion is the most powerful language we have. It has such an ability to communicate and induce people into the solutions. I would really encourage everyone to not underestimate individual impact. If you, this is a hot take, but if you are privileged enough to consider fashion and to consider what you're wearing and how to do your makeup and what to buy and building an outfit, then chances are you also have room to learn a little bit more about where fashion comes from and learn a little bit more about how to consume it responsibly. So, let's not forget, what a privilege it is to care about these issues at all, and do what you can to become an ally. There's the concept of environmental racism is very real for us right now, and that just refers to the disproportionate that we place on minorities and people of color. And we mentioned that we relegate fashion's dirty, most difficult processes to people in far off lands. So it comes back really to the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. And it's so simple. It's so fundamental, but it really is an important consideration. Consider the supply chain. Consider your whole team. And if you wouldn't want to do something yourself, don't ask someone else to do it.
Sarah J., thank you so much for being here today to share your insights and your wisdom and your inspiration. Please follow Sarah. Please follow Sarah along. She's generously offered to offer her, thoughts and experiences to help your business become more sustainable. If this is your first time meeting Sarah and you want to hear a little bit more about her wide swath of experience, she and I did a very detailed Fashion Talks episode, which you can find on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to hear more about her experience. This video will be saved on CAFA's IGTV, where you can also see the previous 16 episodes of Live with CAFA, as CAFA has strived to support our Canadian fashion industry personally and professionally through this time of quarantine. Thank you, Sarah, for being here. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Stay well, and we will see you again next week.